We've all had bad days at work, but what if your job was more than just difficult? What if it was actively, physically destroying you? Today, we're diving into some jobs from history that were so brutal they weren't really a career, they were a slow, agonizing death sentence.
All right, so here's our journey. We're going to look at 4 different eras of labor, with the last one being a job that, unbelievably, still exists today. And then we'll wrap up by looking at what all these haunting stories really teach us about the price of progress.
I mean, it's a question that really makes you stop and think, right? We tend to romanticize the past, but for the people we're about to meet, their daily grind wasn't just about making a living. It was a literal battle for survival, against horrors we can barely imagine. That's because, for these workers, every paycheck came at an unbelievable cost. The cost of their bodies, their faces, and way too often, their lives. So our first story takes us to Victorian London. Now, the job of making matches, the little flames that lit up every home, it sounds almost poetic. But for the women and girls working in the match factories, the reality was a terrifying descent into a chemical hell.
And this right here, this was the signature horror of their job. It was called phossy jaw. As the women breathed in white phosphorus fumes all day, the poison would just creep in. It started small, like a toothache, but soon their teeth would fall out. And then, horrifically, their jawbone would begin to rot away from the inside, giving off this foul smell. And in the dark, the dying bone would actually glow with this eerie, ghostly green light.
So, what did they get for enduring all this suffering? Well, take a look. They worked grueling 14-hour shifts for a measly 4 shillings a week at factories like Bryant and May. And even that tiny wage would get chipped away by fines for things as small as having dirty feet or dropping a match. 1 in 5, that was the mortality rate for workers who got phossy jaw. And the only treatment? Surgically removing their entire jawbone. Survivors were left horribly disfigured, often unable to eat, and were essentially condemned to a slow death by starvation. But this nightmare finally did end, and it was thanks to the incredible courage of the workers themselves. In 1888, after just having enough of the horror, 1,400 women and girls, led by a brave woman named Sarah Chapman, just walked out. Their strike became this landmark victory, forcing real change and eventually leading to a total ban on that deadly white phosphorus. Now, while the match girls were fighting for their rights, there was another group in Victorian England that was even more vulnerable. We're talking about children, some as young as 3 years old, who were treated not like people, but as disposable tools for a life of darkness, soot, and constant mortal danger. 9 inches. Just think about that. After the Great Fire of London, some chimneys were built just 9 inches wide. That's way too small for an adult, but it was just big enough to shove a small child through. They were often sent up naked, the rough brick just tearing their skin raw, scraping their elbows and knees right down to the bone. And here is the absolute cruelest part of this whole story. All of that suffering was completely unnecessary. As you can see here, mechanical brushes that could do the job safely, they already existed, but they cost money. Children, on the other hand, who were often orphans grabbed from workhouses, were seen as expendable, and they were free. The dangers were just relentless and horrific. A kid could suffocate in what was basically a soot avalanche, get burned alive in a chimney that was still hot, or get wedged in so tightly they'd have to be cut out of the walls. And if they somehow survived all that, many developed this agonizing form of scrotal cancer from the soot getting embedded in their skin. It wasn't until a 12-year-old boy named George Brewster died stuck in a hospital chimney in 1875 that the practice was finally outlawed. Okay, let's jump forward now to the Roaring 20s here in America. A glamorous new job opened up for young women, painting the dials on watches with this magical new substance that glowed in the dark. It seemed like the job of a lifetime, but it was built on a foundation of deadly corporate lies. So, to get that super fine point they needed for the tiny numbers on the watch face, supervisors taught the girls this 3-step technique. They would literally put the brush, laced with radium, into their mouths to shape the tip. Hundreds of times a day, they were swallowing poison, all while being told it was totally harmless. They even had fun with it, painting their nails and their teeth, glowing like angels when they went out dancing. And this is where the story goes from tragic to just straight up criminal. The company told these young women the radium paint was so safe you could eat it. But behind the scenes, the company's own scientists,
who were all men, handled the exact same stuff using lead shields and metal tongs because they knew the deadly truth. Before long, the girls' bodies just started to fall apart. Their teeth fell out, their bones crumbled. The first to die, a woman named Molly Maggia, suffered this absolutely horrifying death as her entire jaw just disintegrated and literally fell away from her skull. As they fought the company in court, their lawyers said these powerful words, really capturing their desperation as their bodies were actively failing them. But their unimaginable suffering, it was not in vain. The Radium Girls' courageous fight in court, it changed everything. It established the right for individual workers to sue corporations for this kind of abuse, and it directly led to the creation of the occupational safety standards that protect millions of us at our jobs today. So it's easy to look at these stories and think, wow, thank goodness we've moved past that kind of barbarism. But have we? Really? Let's travel to the Kawah Ijen volcano in Indonesia. At night, it's this breathtaking tourist spot, famous for these ethereal blue flames. But by day, it's a workplace straight out of hell for men who mine what they call the devil's gold. The contrast between these two worlds is just jarring. Tourists pay $20 for a photo op. At the exact same time, miners are descending into an active crater, literally choking on toxic sulfur gas, to earn about $5 for a trip down and back. They're working right next to a lake that's so acidic it can dissolve metal. 154 pounds, that's the average weight of sulfur a miner a man like Mustar carries on his shoulders in these wicker baskets. Now get this, he himself only weighs 132 pounds, so he's hauling a load heavier than his own body up a steep 1,000-foot crater wall, twice, every single day. The weight has carved permanent scars into his skin and is deforming his spine. And there it is, the final, cruelest part. Just like with the chimney sweeps, this backbreaking, life-shortening work is completely and totally unnecessary. Almost all of the world's sulfur is extracted safely and efficiently from oil refineries. This mine only exists for two reasons. It's a cheap source of sulfur for one company, and it provides a spectacle for tourism. You know, when you look back at all four of these stories, this painful pattern just emerges. It doesn't matter if it's phosphorus, or soot, or radium, or sulfur. The lesson is always the same. When profits are put ahead of people, the cost is always paid in human suffering. And that fight for just basic safety, it's never really over. The Match Girls fight gave us safer products. The Radium Girls sacrifice gave us protections at our jobs. So it really forces us to ask a tough question. What hidden human costs are woven into all the conveniences that we enjoy in our modern lives? What suffering somewhere out of sight is being sacrificed for us right now?